I saw on LinkedIn something that Dr. Levitt put up, and it just got me because I know, well, you know, if you watch some of my videos, that I go on the whole time about exercise and this is good for MS. And one of the things with exercise is this heat that you can get. I've got it many times, and this study was about that. And it really struck me as a cheap and easy and simple way. Vicky, tell us about it.
If I can explain very briefly how
Sure.
I came to this point, because I do study cognition, right? I'm mostly interested in the brain, optimizing cognition for all of us. And about 10 years ago, we were running an exercise trial in my lab because I wanted to improve people's memory function. And that's when I came to understand that a lot of people with MS, when you approach them and say, would you like to be part of an exercise trial? A lot of them say, no, thank you. And that is because of, as you mentioned, the overheating, which we know, and which has a name, which is Uhthoff's phenomenon, right? We know that there was a
Yeah.
German neuro-ophthalmologist named Wilhelm Uhthoff. In 1889, he observed and published a paper on the ill effects of hot baths and exercise for his patients with MS,
Yeah.
specifically as it related to visual problems. That's what he was
Yeah.
noticing. And so in the intervening 130 years, we've looked at overheating in people with MS numerous ways, and we know that it causes lots and lots of problems. Sort of as you said, a cheap and easy fix when I started to think about the overheating and the exercise and the cognition and bringing it all together. There have been a lot of cooling therapies and techniques, cooling vests,
Oh,
cooling.
I've got a cooling vest.
Sure, right. And submersion in an ice bath, these
Yeah.
kinds of things. There was an exercise experiment where they had people putting their hand into a vacuum refrigerator chamber while they were exercising on a treadmill. I mean, these are like crazy times, right? These are, what they definitively established is that cooling people down is good.
Yeah.
But these methods were not. Even
You talk about Uhthoff's. I used to cycle a lot. Cycling was my thing. I loved it. But what I considered a long cycle ride was about 140 miles. And and nipping out 50 miles is the kind of thing you do in the evening with the club. So I had this whole different sort of mindset about what it was. But it came that when I was cycling hard and we were doing things, the heat buildup just started to affect my balance on the bike. Hey, as my brother said to me once, you just turn into a bloody danger to everybody because you're sort of trying to look around and it's the heat.
yeah.
It's knowing how to get that awful sort of hot, too hot and you can't get rid of it. And it's affecting your balance and your thinking and your speech. And I want to exercise at this level. And if I have to throttle it down to this level, I don't, we've all got our levels, is what I'm saying, but it's an issue.
So what we wanted to try was giving people a standard adult dose of aspirin, 650 milligrams before exercise. Now people are like, whoa, that's a lot of aspirin. It's take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning aspirin, right? It's 2. It's a standard adult dose of aspirin.
Right.
So the reason that we chose that dosage is because in the early OOs, there were actually 2 successful trials of daily aspirin administration in people with MS to reduce fatigue.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Both of them found the same thing, that with that standard adult dose of aspirin once a day for 6 weeks, they got people's level of self-reported fatigue reduced. Now, what both of them talked about in their papers, good news, right? Both of them talked about the anti-inflammatory effects of aspirin, but I was thinking about body temperature. When I looked at those results, I thought to myself, I think they cooled people down, because we actually published 2 papers. We introduced the first 2 papers to the MS literature showing that people with MS have a slightly elevated basal body temperature, and that slight elevation is correlated with their level of self-reported fatigue. So we started connecting the dots a little bit differently than anybody else ever had. We started thinking about body temperature increase, increased fatigue, and the effects on exercise, and how getting people's body temperature down.
Can I interrupt you for a second? I think when we talk about things very discrete, like body temperature and fatigue and everything, it's so linked. This is it. It's sort of twiddling one knob affects the other 2. You can't do, and all of a sudden, things that you're doing and things that other people are doing, I think we're starting to see. It doesn't feel so sort of linearized. It's A, B, or C.
But I'll tell you this, here's something interesting that I learned by moving into this area to study it, is that body temperature, as fundamental and simple and basic as it is. I mean, you can remember being a kid and having your mom jam a thermometer into your body somewhere.
Under my tongue, I like to think.
Okay. We actually know very little about what drives body temperature changes. And by the way, men versus women, whole different worlds of body temperature changes. So it's a whole complicated story.
Yeah.
But aspirin reduces body temperature. It is antipyretic. In addition to being anti-inflammatory and analgesic, pain relieving, it's also antipyretic. It reduces body temperature.
I also understand that to not such a great extent, but still, see, in the UK, we use something a lot called paracetamol, which you guys call acetaminophen, which is Tylenol.
Mhm.
And you are finding that effect with Tylenol stroke paracetamol?
So what we did was we recruited people into the study, and they were scheduled for 3 separate visits to come into the lab, and we did a maximal exercise tests. At the visit, they received a pill. It was double-blind design. I didn't know what the pill was. They didn't know what the pill was. It was either aspirin, placebo, or acetaminophen, paracetamol.
Right. Okay. So there was, you could have had one of 3.
One of 3 arms. So they took a pill, waited an hour, and then we put them on the cycle ergometer, and we had them cycle to peak exertion. And we measured their body temperature every 2 minutes. We measured their heart rate. We measured their total watts expended. We had a whole workup with our exercise physiologist. And what we found was that after being given aspirin, the amount of body temperature increase that they experienced was reduced to 0.00. And that was actually a 99% smaller increase in body temperature relative to the placebo. Now, the acetaminophen was also related to a decrease in body temperature increase by about 56%. Right. So it was also a big, whopping improvement.
So significant.
Significant, highly significant. With regards to our secondary outcomes, all the physiological things we looked at, aspirin differed from placebo for every outcome. So people had a higher watts expenditure, which means like better productivity. Yeah. They had lower heart rate at the end of their session. They also had lower reported exertion for both breath and leg fatigue. They had lower ratings of pain and lower ratings of overall fatigue. So we think that we can see there were lots of benefits of aspirin treatment. Aspirin is very, very safe. It really is. It is abidingly safe for most people, unless you have some sort of a counterindication, which is easy enough to find out, either talking to your doctor. When I went looking for the safety advice, what I found was that the FDA has said that no one should be taking more than 6,000 milligrams of aspirin a day.
Oh, right. Okay. That's quite a bit.
So I feel like we're in the clear. No.
Well, you're about 1/10 of that, aren't you? So it's yeah. So all right.
You would have to be throwing back a lot of aspirin to meet that threshold. Yeah. They're over-the-counter drugs. They're so relatively safe. Most of us have taken them at some point, so we know how our body responds to them. So if you like the idea of seeing whether it helps you exercise more comfortably or just live more comfortably in the world, try it. That's the beauty of this work, is like, go try it. I found that I've established the science that shows that its benefits are quantifiable. Now go try it. You don't need to get into a trial. You don't need to get a prescription. You don't need to grapple with your drug company or your health system. Just go.
Especially in your country, everything's hugely expensive. So
everything's a struggle.
I think this is a brilliant way to end this video. Go and try it. So that's awesome. I really appreciate you coming on again. I know it's earlier in the morning for you, so it's just great to be able to get experts to explain, to help patients. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.